Welcome to A Brief History of Humankind, or its condensation, by Yuval Noah Harari, a new book review video on historical veracity, where we delve into the monumental works of Yuval Noah Harari, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, and Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow. These books are an impressive blend of history and philosophy, though they're not without their controversies, particularly regarding the role of religion and its portrayal. Sculpting Human History. Yuval Noah Harari's two books, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, and Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, are an impressive project of history and philosophy. However, it seems that in several crucial human issues, ideology prevails over truth. Rabbi Chaim Navon criticized the place and influence of religion in Harari's books and found it lacking. In a bookstore in Prague, I suddenly came across a local translation of Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. I didn't need to understand Czech to decipher the paper wrap around the book. It turns out that Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, is also a bestseller in Central Europe. On one hand, it's always nice to encounter familiar sellers abroad, especially in a bookstore. On the other hand, I was a bit sorry to encounter this particular seller there. Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, and its younger sibling, Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, are, regrettably, excellent non-fiction books. They are well-written, enlightening, interesting, and unconventional. Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, is a history book that does not talk about wars, battles, and rulers, but about major processes in history and prehistory. It identifies three major revolutions in human history. The cognitive revolution, which happened around 70,000 years ago. The agricultural revolution, around 10,000 years ago. And the scientific revolution, just yesterday, about 500 years ago. The choice of a timescale of tens of thousands of years dictates much of the book's content. When a historian writes a book about events that happened in a single day, and there are such, it is clear before even reading the first word that this day has, in the author's opinion, a special significance. Conversely, when an author surveys 70,000 years far beyond our documented history, this choice alone teaches that in his view, all of human deeds, conquests and kingdoms, nations and peoples, initiatives and rebellions have very little importance in the face of the truly great forces at work in the world. In general, humans are just another animal species. Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, continues to develop its older brother's ideas, focusing mainly on the author's predictions for the future development of humanity. According to him, humanity is likely to take on three projects: the conquest of aging and possibly death, finding the key to happiness, and as a result of these, upgrading the human species. The future, in his view, holds rapid technological development of superhuman abilities, maybe even immortality. Perhaps we will even transform into a different species altogether, into superhumans. That is, those of us or our children who will get to experience it. We shall live and see. As mentioned, regrettably, these are excellent books. Why regrettably? I could mention the post-Zionist hints or the disdain displayed towards Judaism, as I find the only sentence in both books that speaks favorably of religions is phrased thus: "It would be a mistake to ignore the wisdom accumulated over 2,500 years by millions of Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Taoists, Stoics, and Epicureans." One religion is omitted from this list because, according to him, to claim that Judaism influenced the world through Christianity is like claiming that Newton's mother influenced the world. But here lies his mistake, as Newton never claimed to replace his mother. But Christianity claims to replace the Jews and represent what the Jews represented. But the truth is that both of these books are based on an even more problematic thesis. From a certain angle, they can be seen as a relativistic manifesto. Harari repeatedly emphasizes that everything beyond biology is merely imagination and illusion. In fact, the more we delve into the human interior, we find no soul but only organs, hormones, synapses, and genes. Reminds me somewhat of the haughty statement by Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, "I was in the heavens and did not find God." Religions, beliefs, values, morality, all are illusion and fiction. Harari concedes that even if the soul is debatable, It's clear that humans have consciousness. Indeed, as Descartes taught us, it's much easier to prove the existence of consciousness than the existence of the external world. Harari also admits the challenge that the existence of consciousness poses to the theory of evolution. Why did consciousness develop? Why is it necessary for our survival? He recognizes the immense difficulty of scientifically explaining the link between consciousness and the body, between mental processes and physical phenomena. Yet, Harari does not concede that the existence of consciousness undermines his materialistic view. Consciousness cannot be explained in materialistic terms, and the link between it and the material world remains an unfathomable mystery. Does not this fact alone undermine the pretense to explain the world solely on a material basis? To Harari's credit, he does not discriminate. Idolatry, Judaism, Christianity, capitalism, liberal humanism, human rights. In his eyes, they are all imagined religions that humans have concocted for themselves. This relativistic perspective, which pretends to be new, is actually very old. Already in ancient Greece, one could find several individuals who said similar things, and certainly there were those before them. Like any relativistic manifesto, one wonders from where Sapiens, a Brief History of Humankind, draws the ideological zeal to argue against every form of ideological zeal. Harari presents the claim that all beliefs are stories invented with full enthusiasm, as if revealing the naked truth to the naive and astonished. But his argument defeats itself. If every claim that cannot be tangibly verified is just a story that humanity invents, then this argument itself is also just a story. And if so, there are much more successful stories than his. In other words, the meta-narrative that calls for dismantling all meta-narratives also needs to be dismantled. Moreover, Harari himself argues that the progress of Homo sapiens began with the cognitive revolution about 70,000 years ago. Thanks to human ability to invent and believe in grand narratives, it became possible for massive populations of humans to cooperate. For example, we Jews bought the story that we are one people. And because of this story, we are willing to cooperate and even sacrifice for one another. Without these stories, no large human society would have been formed. Therefore, Harari probably assumes his books won't really succeed. Because what he calls stories, namely our beliefs, will work only as long as we believe they are true beliefs and not invented stories. In one of Asimov's stories, a scientist discovers that human sense of humor is an experiment conducted by aliens. At that moment, all humans lose their sense of humor. Similarly, if we believe Harari, immediately all stories will stop convincing us, and accordingly, we will stop cooperating, bringing disaster upon the human species. If Harari hopes that there is still a future for humanity, and his books seem to suggest he does, this hope probably relies on the assumption that his readers won't really believe him. Harari himself tells us such stories. For example, he advocates for animal rights. This statement is consistent with his emphasis throughout both books that humans are essentially animals, with slightly different abilities from other animals. Beyond the usual failure of making an ideological claim from the mouth of a relativist, this claim elegantly defeats itself even more, because no other animal preaches vegetarianism ideologically. A lion hunts zebras without hesitation. The zebra does not hunt lions, nor does it eat snails. But this is not due to moral considerations, but due to instincts, survival techniques, and its digestive system structure. Does not the fact that Harari can formulate an argument about our basic identity with animals, and try to convince us of its moral implications, undermine the supposed imaginary identification between us and the animals on which his argument itself is based? One of the central claims of Harari in Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, is that the religions believing in God have finished their historical role and will no longer have significant influence on the direction in which human society is heading. He poses the expected question, what about radical Islam? And answers that it is not of great significance because radical Islam does not understand the world of the 21st century. This seems like a strange approach, in my opinion, for a historian. Harari has a theory about what the world should look like in the 21st century. In the theory he builds, there is no place for traditional religions. Yet the most influential force in the international arena in the first decade and a half of this century is precisely radical Islam, which has no role in the current reality, as understood by Harari. The influence of radical Islam is very negative, but also very strong. How does one reconcile the theory with reality? Harari explains that reality ignores the theory, and therefore it has no validity. Or perhaps it is Harari who does not understand the world of the 21st century. Maybe religion will continue to be a very central force in the life of humanity, for better in its positive manifestations and for worse in its negative ones. That's a wrap on our journey through human history, and a glimpse into our possible futures with Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens and Homo Deus. We hope it sparked your curiosity and got you thinking about what's next for humanity. If you enjoyed this exploration and want to be part of the conversation, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep digging into the past and pondering the future. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on where we're headed. Thanks for watching. Stay curious and see you in the next video.